We're gonna look to the people for wisdom in the hard times coming ahead. We're gonna sing and shout, we're gonna work it out in the hard times coming ahead. With people's wisdom, with people's wisdom, with people's wisdom, we can make it.
Has been labeled as participatory research has perhaps been going on for centuries. But the term participatory research and the movement around it is only 8 to 9 years old. And the origins of it are in the adult education movement in Tanzania. And people engaged in the adult education process as a vehicle for the socio-economic transformation of that society recognized the limitations and the negative impact of classical research and began to question that and look around and invent ways to overcome this difficulty. And it was in 1976 Dar es Salaam Conference on Adult Education that for the first time some adult educators from the third and first world countries formed a small nucleus to articulate these concerns, and that is the origin of the label participatory research and the movement. We have been involved in several participatory research, training or evaluation efforts in the last several years, and a few months ago we began to think about the possibility of taking a critical look at our own experiences and those of others who are similarly engaged in this country to see whether various characteristics of participatory research as we have practiced or at least tried to practice, to what extent they really operate, what form they take, what shape they take. And it is in a way an exercise to analyze collectively our own experience and those of others who have been similarly involved. Presently what we thought and we believe participatory research implies for us is at least 5 key characteristics. The first one is, of course, the question of control. Who controls the objectives of research? Who controls the methods of research? Who controls the outcomes of research? And if we look at it from the classical research perspective, then this issue of control was never an issue, because it was assumed that the researcher decides the objectives and the researcher designs the study and the researcher collects the data and the researcher produces the output. What we are saying in participatory research is that this unilateral control is to be questioned, and in a way it is the very antithesis of any participatory grassroots practice. And so the issue of control is a central issue. The second question is more important, which is who benefits from this study? What is going to happen to this study? And particularly it's a matter of concern for us in a country like India, where we don't have too many resources to waste, where people have been doing research which is pointless, which is inconsequential. They have been studying inconsequential phenomena precisely. What is the fun of that? And we also believe that the ideology of the researcher gets reflected in this issue of control. And if the researcher attempts to pretend that he or she is a neutral, objective researcher, we are convinced that what that means is supporting the status quo. What really that does is to perpetuate the control of the establishment. And there is nothing like a neutral or objective inquiry or research.
I would like to add something to this, that as we have experience and we have now a long history of traditional academic university-based research also, and what we have experienced is that a big part of it is quite sterile. For example, we are working in Kanpur, and so many university researchers keep coming to us. They take much of our time, they interview so many activists and workers, they go to factories, they go to communities, and they ask for old records and newspapers and clippings and pamphlets and struggle documents and things like that. And what we have seen that they get PhDs and they get jobs in universities and in different places, and they forget the area, they never come back again. I can recall the instances when such university researchers who have done research on very significant issues like history of the working class movement in textile industry in Kanpur, they have spent lot of time, even months in Kanpur, and after completing their research, after submitting their thesis and after getting a job in some university, they have never tried to come back. And when we of our own have contacted them that now you have got all kind of information, it will be good if you can prepare a brief simply written version, and if you can give it to workers, or if you can come to our meetings and you can have one study circle of our worker activists in which you can give them a historical perspective. They don't have time for all these things. So to me, I would like to put it very straight that much of the university research and the kind of research various institutions are organizing is of a very sterile kind.
And people don't benefit.
People don't benefit, and it does not help them. And they are used as a tool. They are just taken as information material, as data. They are reduced to objectives.
So what role do people play in participatory research? What's the alternative to this classical control?
I think the most important thing that we should try to explain to workers, and that as a matter of fact we are trying to do, is that research, of course historically it has been monopolized, it has been dominated by university researchers and academicians, but this is not something which ordinary people can't do. As a matter of fact, ordinary people in their ordinary day-to-day life, they do research on various things, and research related to their problems they can do. And we have been seeing that now they are taking this kind of responsibility and they are quite enthusiastic about it. And I think the kind of information that is now coming, the kind of data that is coming, the kind of things that are coming forward are most interesting, and university researchers or any traditional researchers could not have access to that kind of information. This kind of research creates more sense of involvement and more sense of belonging.
We believe that participatory research is a contribution to the organization building process of the people. And where organizations of people do not exist at a micro local level, the very act of getting involved in a collective inquiry of a micro situation, we have found in our experience to be an important contribution towards their organization building process. Of course, where organizations of the people exist, participatory research enhances their strength and capability. So what I believe is possible is for using participatory research in the unorganized situations as a small and limited contribution to the process of organization building. But it has to be sustained over a period of time with activities other than research. Where people are themselves organized and are initiating a research process, there they make use of it most immediately. And it is very intricately linked to their action. For them, knowledge is relevant only as far as it contributes to action. And that really is another very interesting thing about participatory research, is the whole third issue of praxis. For us, it is a sort of a close linkage between theory and practice. And historically, classical research makes a dichotomy between the two. That you go through the theory and then you stop at certain point when you have evolved a theory, and then practice follows. But in participatory research, we have found that it is a very cyclical and iterative process, and that there are different levels of theory that people evolve depending on different levels of action that they undertake. And they go hand in hand, almost hand in hand. And the starting point can be either action or theory, but after a period of time they are really very closely linked. So it's very hard to separate one from the other and say this is pure theory and this is pure action, which I think is very important element of participatory research, because it transcends the dichotomy of theory and practice.
How can action contaminate the theory? If any kind of research, any kind of theory is not leading to any kind of action in context to social change, then what is the use of that kind of research, that kind of investigation, that kind of theory? I really don't understand that.
Well, this is because you are fortunately not indoctrinated into the social science research paradigm, and in a way your lack of education in that discipline is an asset to you, and that is the greatest danger that we have found in participatory research, that people having gone through fair amount of socialization as professional researchers find it very difficult to unlearn that process.
No, I think there is a certain amount of capitalist division of labor is involved in the field of education and research also. That some people have taken upon themselves the responsibility to evolve the theory, to do the research work, and there is a vast mass of people which is destined or condemned to do the action work. Some have as if they feel that the entire mass of people is going to mortgage their brain, their thinking to few people who are university based and research institutions based, and they will be only doing the action and they will be providing the theory. I think this is a very bourgeoisie, very capitalist kind of division of labor that is that we see in the field of research and education also. And when it involves the question of movement, working class movement, I think the first thing we should do, first thing which needs to be done, is to do away with this kind of division of labor in the field of theory and research and education.
Division between minds and masses.
Yeah.
And hands and brains kind of thing. You see, it is interesting in this context.
And this thing involves a certain kind of contempt also, certain kind of preconceived assumption that most of the people can't think for themselves, they can't plan for themselves, they can't analyze their situation. So some of them, in a very arbitrary fashion, they take upon themselves the responsibility of thinking for other people.
Where increasingly an elite class of people with very strict norms and rules have appropriated to themselves the role of thinkers for others, and it has legitimized a certain behavior, certain training, certain qualification, certain external symbols which determine whether what you do is research or not research. And this very act over the period of 100 years or so has increasingly controlled the definition of knowledge. Today, what is printed word is equated with knowledge, and in this way we recognize as a very important and perhaps the fourth characteristic of participatory research the central role of popular knowledge, because we believe that people have knowledge, people have information, people have analysis, people have insights which may not be today legitimized as knowledge. I mean, this has been shown most dramatically in the case of healthcare, where the traditional health practices, medicines of people seem to have such sound so-called scientific basis, which are being rediscovered, so to speak, by the whole primary healthcare movement today. But in the hardcore medical profession, it will be called superstition, it will be called prejudice, it will be called ignorance. So I believe that one of the important characteristics of participatory research is its recognition and validation of popular knowledge, which has been so far denied, systematically denied, in the interest of the elite class, which has the vested interest to be called the knowledge providers or knowledge generators. So it is in a way challenging the very premise of what is knowledge and who has the capability to produce knowledge. We have found in our experience that in the early stages of participatory research movement, much of the examples and experiences related to a very micro setting. There were struggles against landlords, local oppressors, but increasingly we are beginning to feel the need of using participatory research to deal with some of the macro issues, to deal with oppression which starts from New Delhi or Washington DC, and which is, I think, in the last decade and in the coming time is going to be an increasingly more powerful oppression than what is local, immediate and visible. It is in this context that we began to examine our own understanding and position vis-a-vis what is known as legitimate knowledge and not legitimate knowledge. We realize that people's knowledge has to be in a way systematized, organized, and then communicated in a form that is recognized as legitimate. And that form today is a very rigid printed word form. Now that is important for the purposes of influencing decision makers, challenging the premise of arguments of those decision makers who are sitting in New Delhi or Washington. The fact that participatory research has demonstrated its contribution to the empowerment of the ordinary people is perhaps its most overriding characteristic. Empowerment in the sense of ordinary people rediscovering their capabilities, their confidence, their faith in their own experience and knowledge as a basis for their action, as a basis for their struggles, as a basis for their organization. We have seen time and again that on small issues, on small areas of confrontation and conflict, the potency of knowledge in the hands of the people it is clear that in the current situation, nationally and internationally, knowledge is perhaps the most powerful tool for control. Knowledge is also the most powerful method of control. And as people begin to get involved in their own research, in their own investigation, in their own analysis, they begin to discover for themselves their own power, their own collective sense of we can do it.
It has a great mobilizing effect.
We're gonna look to the people for wisdom in the hard times coming ahead. We're gonna sing and shout, we're gonna work it out in the hard times coming ahead. With people's wisdom, with people's wisdom, with people's wisdom, we can make